Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture the very beginning. Not just the beginning of this conversation or the beginning of your day, but the beginning of you. The
Oh.
absolute point zero.
The literal start.
Exactly. The source material we are diving into today, it kicks off with an image that is, well, honestly, it's a bit jarring.
It's powerful, the moment of conception.
Right. But it's not just biology in the way we learned it in high school, sperm meets egg, cells divide, that whole process.
No, they're talking about something far more elemental. They're talking about light.
Yeah. There's this documented phenomenon mentioned in the documentary The Primordial Code 2, The Burning Essence by Maureen Pauls. And apparently, at the very instant the sperm enters the egg, there is a flash of light.
A literal, measurable spark.
Yeah.
Zinc atoms explode outward, and there's this fluorescent flash. It's incredible.
Which, really, it just sets the stage for the entire argument this deep dive is going to unpack.
Absolutely. If our existence begins with a flash of light, it suggests that human beings are fundamentally beings of frequency and energy, not just.
Not just flesh and blood.
Exactly. And the central thesis here is that we've completely lost the manual for how to operate that energy.
It really feels like we're just stumbling around in the dark, doesn't it?
It does.
And so this deep dive is essentially a mission into what the documentary calls suppressed knowledge. We're going to explore the argument that humanity has been, well, systematically disconnected from its primal instincts and its natural frequencies.
And disconnected by a combination of things. They point to synthetic technology, a deliberate narrowing of our sensory perception, and even historical manipulation, all of which, according to the source, has been designed to keep us from understanding who and what we really are.
It's about how we've been turned from, what do they call them, wild types?
Wild types, yes. Turned from that into these domesticated, sort of low-frequency versions of ourselves.
It sounds incredibly heavy, but when you actually break it down, the journey is fascinating. We've got a really clear roadmap for today. First, we're going deep, and I mean literally deep into the hidden nature of water. And spoiler alert, it is not just H2O.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Then we'll look at the body as an antenna. I mean, if we are beings of frequency, what happens when you surround that antenna with all these artificial signals like 5G or radio waves?
We're also going to talk about trauma. This part was eye-opening for me. Why do animals shake it off, but humans bottle it all up?
And finally, we get into this really mind-bending theory about our senses, the idea of 12 senses versus the 5 we're taught we have, and what that means for the difference between actual choice and just, curated selection.
It's a journey from the center of the earth to the center of the brain.
That's a good way to put it.
So let's start with water. I try to drink my 8 glasses a day, and I think I know what water is. It's wet, it comes out of the tap, it keeps me alive. Simple.
We all think that.
But the source starts by interviewing a geophysicist, a guy named Hans Kepler, and he just drops this bombshell about where water actually comes from.
This is the deep reservoir theory. And it really challenges everything we thought we knew. Usually we think of the water cycle as, rain, rivers, oceans, evaporation, and then it repeats.
Yeah, the diagram from grade school.
Exactly. It's a very surface-level understanding. But Kepler suggests that the water on the surface, all the oceans, all the lakes, the ice caps, that's just a fraction of what's actually here on the planet.
He talks about what's happening 400 kilometers down, and I have to admit, that's way deeper than I thought water could exist. I mean, isn't it just magma and fire and pressure down there?
That's the common assumption, for sure. But in the documentary, they show this piece of volcanic basalt. It's literally a rock from the Earth's mantle. And inside this rock, there's this green stuff.
The green stuff, okay.
It's a piece of the mantle that got dragged up during an eruption. And when they analyze that green mineral structure, they find traces of water locked inside of it.
Okay, I need you to pause on that. When you say water inside a rock, I'm picturing like a wet sponge or maybe a geode with a little puddle inside. But we're talking about the mantle here. The temperatures would melt bone. How does water even survive that?
That is the crucial distinction. We are not talking about sloshing liquid water. It's not H2O in that sense. We're talking about water at a molecular level. Specifically, hydroxyl radicals, so oxygen and hydrogen atoms, that are chemically bonded into the crystal structure of the mineral itself.
Oh, so it's part of the rock.
It is part of the rock's very structure. The mineral is called ringwoodite.
Ringwoodite. Sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's very real. It's a high-pressure phase of olivine, which is a common mineral. And you could think of it like a sponge, but the sponge is made of solid rock, and the water is trapped in these tiny atomic gaps. So Hans Kepler's analysis suggests that this specific mineral, this ringwoodite, acts as a massive storage tank for water.
So when that green stuff comes to the surface, it's basically proof. It's the evidence that the Earth is holding this ocean's worth of potential water just locked in a stone cage 400 kilometers down.
Precisely. It's the smoking gun.
So if you could somehow wring out the Earth's mantle like a giant washcloth.
Kepler does that exact calculation in the documentary. If you take the traces of water found in that one sample and you extrapolate it across the entire volume of the Earth's mantle, you are looking at a reservoir of water in the interior that is comparable in volume to all the oceans on the surface combined.
Wait, say that again?
An entire ocean's worth of water, or even more, is inside the Earth.
That just completely changes the picture of the planet. It's not a rock with water on it. It's a water-saturated rock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it totally changes how we view the life cycle of the planet itself. It's not a static system. There's this equilibrium theory they present. Water isn't just staying on the surface. It is constantly being recycled through subduction zones.
Subduction zones, that's where the tectonic plates crash into each other, right? One goes under the other.
Right. One plate dives under another and descends deep into the mantle. And as it goes down, it drags ocean water with it, locking that water into the rock under immense pressure.
So it's pulling the ocean down into the Earth.
It is. And then, over millions of years, that water is cycled back up and exhaled through volcanoes as steam.
So the Earth essentially breathing water. It's inhaling it into the mantle and then exhaling it through volcanoes.
Precisely. It's a massive planetary lung. It's a living system. And here is where it gets really interesting for the future of our planet. The source explains that as the Earth slowly cools down over billions of years, the chemistry of the mantle changes. It becomes more efficient at absorbing and holding onto water.
So it traps more than it releases.
Exactly. The balance shifts.
I feel like every disaster movie ever made predicts water world, right? The ice caps melt, the coasts are gone. But this is saying the complete opposite.
Right. The long-term scientific projection here isn't water world. It's a dry out. In a billion years or so, as the interior cools, the mantle might just drink up the oceans. The deep reservoir will expand, and the surface will slowly dry out.
But for now, we're in this dynamic balance.
For now, yeah.
Wow. That is wild. It makes the water in my glass feel a lot more temporary and precious.
It does, doesn't it?
But the documentary doesn't just stick to the quantity of water, the sheer volume of it. It pivots pretty hard to the quality of water. And this is where things get a bit more metaphysical, I guess.
It is. It's the difference between looking at water as a chemical substance, H2O, and water as a living crystal. The source argues that in nature, like in a pristine glacier or a mountain, spring water is in a liquid crystalline structured state.
Structured water. Okay, I've heard this term thrown around in wellness circles, usually when someone's trying to sell me a very expensive water bottle.
I know the type.
But what does the source actually say that means? Is it just a fancy way of saying ice?
No, it's not ice. And it's not liquid in the chaotic way we usually think of it. It's often called a fourth phase of water, sometimes called exclusion zone or EZ water. It means the molecules are highly organized. They line up in this hexagonal lattice structure, very similar to a honeycomb.
Okay, so it has a pattern.
It has a pattern. And the claim is that this structure is what allows for instantaneous signal transfer in the human body.
Because that structure allows for better conductivity, like a clean wire versus a frayed one.
That's a great analogy. If we are, as some contexts suggest, 99% water by molecular count, then the structure of that water dictates how well our cells communicate with each other. Think of a marching band. If everyone is in formation, they can move and turn instantly as a single unit. That's structured water.
Okay, that makes sense. So if nature makes this perfect marching band water, what is coming out of my tap?
Dead water. That's the term they use.
Dead water. That sounds ominous.
It is. The argument is that once water is forced into high-pressure pipes, processed with chemicals like chlorine and fluoride, and made to flow in these unnatural right angles through a synthetic city grid, it loses that coherent state.
So the marching band turns into a mosh pit.
A perfect analogy. It becomes chaotic. The molecules are just bouncing off each other randomly, so when you drink it, your body has to expend its own precious energy to reorganize that water to structure it before your cells can even use it.
So we're drinking water that is chemically H2O, but energetically it's broken. We have to fix it ourselves internally.
That's the perspective, yes. And because it's dead, it can't support that instant biological communication effectively. It essentially disconnects us from our biological potential because our internal antenna, the water in our bodies, isn't tuned correctly.
They mention a historical anecdote to back this up, this idea that water has power beyond just hydration. They talk about Charles IV.
Yes, the Holy Roman Emperor, the founder of the city of Karlovy Vary, or Carlsbad, in the Czech Republic. Back in the 1300s, the story goes that he discovered these hot springs completely by accident while he was out hunting. He was chasing a stag, and his dog fell into a hot spring.
And I'm guessing the dog didn't just come out clean.
No. The story is that the emperor himself had an injured leg, a hunting wound that just wouldn't heal. And he soaked his leg in this spring water, and the leg healed miraculously fast. The point being, it wasn't just about washing the wound. It was understood as an energetic transfer.
It had a power.
It had a power.
Yeah.
The source uses this to highlight that we used to respect water as this medicinal, even spiritual entity. We built temples around springs. Now it's just a utility bill we pay every month.
It really makes you look at your water bottle completely differently. But this idea of water being conductive, of it being a signal carrier, that leads us directly into the next big topic. If our bodies are full of this water, we aren't just bags of fluid, we are electrical beings.
This is the crucial pivot in the documentary. If the body is made of this crystalline water, then the body is essentially an electromagnetic resonator. The source brings up a theory that defines life itself not just as biological processes, but as a dynamic equilibrium of cellular vibrations.
So if life is, good vibrations, then what is disease? Is it just bad vibes?
In a very literal physics sense, yes. Disease is described as oscillatory disequilibrium. It means your cells are vibrating deeply out of sync with their natural, healthy frequency. They've lost the rhythm.
They use insects to explain this, right? Which I thought was a really helpful way to understand it, because I always just thought of antenna as, feelers.
It's a great analogy. Think about a moth or a beetle. They have these long, intricate antennae. We assume they're just tactile sticks, poking things to see if they're there. But the source argues they are highly tuned to specific natural frequencies. That's how they navigate. That's how they find mates. They're picking up on the electromagnetic map of the world.
So they're not feelers, they're radar dishes.
They're tiny biological radar dishes. And the argument is that humans are doing the exact same thing.
We're just a much larger, wetter antenna.
A much larger, wetter antenna. Because we're filled with that structured water, we are constantly emitting and absorbing high-frequency radiation. We are not closed systems. We are open circuits, constantly interacting with the electromagnetic environment around us.
This brings us to a character who sounds like he stepped right out of a steampunk sci-fi novel, George Lakhovsky.
A fascinating and controversial figure. He was a Russian inventor working in Paris in the early 1900s, and he developed this device called the multi-wave oscillator.
The name alone sounds cool. What did it do?
It was based entirely on this idea of cellular oscillation. Lakhovsky believed that if cancer or any disease is just a cell vibrating at the wrong frequency, basically it's losing its energy, then you could fix it. He compared it to a child on a swing.
Okay, lay out the swing analogy for me.
So a child is swinging, and they stop bumping their legs. The swing slows down, the arc gets smaller and smaller, and eventually it stops. That's a dying cell. But if you come along and you give it a little push, a pulse of energy at just the right moment, the swing starts moving again.
You restore its momentum.
You restore its momentum. The multi-wave oscillator was designed to provide that push. It emitted a broad spectrum of healing frequencies, the idea being that every cell could find its own specific resonance and essentially recharge.
So it's like jump-starting a car battery, but for the cell's vibration.
Exactly. It was designed to restore the natural, healthy oscillation. And the source claims he had significant documented success. He was treating cancer patients in Parisian hospitals in the 1920s and 30s with this device. And they show photographs from the time of tumors shrinking and skin lesions healing. It's quite remarkable.
So this is the obvious question. Why isn't there a multi-wave oscillator in every doctor's office today? Why are we doing chemo and radiation instead of sitting in front of a copper coil?
Well, this is where the suppressed knowledge theme really kicks in hard. Lakhovsky moved to New York to escape the war in Europe. He died there in 1942. He was hit by a car, but the circumstances were, they're described as murky.
And after he died?
After he died, what happened next is clear. The devices were banned by the AMA, they were confiscated, they were destroyed. His work was systematically removed from medical textbooks.
The source uses a pretty cynical phrase here. When the doctor can heal it, the devil will steal it.
It points directly to the rise of the pharmaceutical industry. Think about the business model. A machine that cures you with frequency is a one-time fix, or maybe a low-cost maintenance fix.
It doesn't require a lifetime of
It
pills.
doesn't generate recurring revenue.
Mm.
The argument presented is that this incredible technology was buried to protect the emerging and far more profitable business model of modern medicine.
And that leads us right to the modern-day version of this frequency war. If Lakhovsky was trying to heal with frequencies, the documentary argues that modern technology is doing the exact opposite. We have to talk about 5G.
We do. The source takes a very critical look at the rollout of 5G, the Starlink satellites, and this blanket of pulsed microwave radiation that we all live under now. They mentioned 60 satellites hurtling into the sky at a time, cell towers on every corner. We are saturated.
I want to push back on this for just a second because we hear about 5G danger all the time, but the counter-argument from the telecom industry is always the same. They say it's non-ionizing radiation. It isn't X-rays. It doesn't have the energy to knock electrons off atoms or cause direct DNA damage. So is the source saying the physicists are wrong about that?
They are saying the physicists are wrong about ionization. They are saying they're looking at the wrong metric entirely. You mentioned the plastic dummy standard earlier. This is how safety is determined.
The specific absorption rate, or SAR, I've seen that on my phone box.
Right. To set the safety limits for your cell phone, they take a plastic dummy, a literal mannequin head, they fill it with a gel that mimics the density of brain tissue, and they strap a phone to it. Then they measure if the gel heats up.
It's all about thermal effects. So if it doesn't cook the gel, it's deemed safe.
Precisely. But the source argues that biology is far, far more subtle than a microwave oven. We aren't plastic dummies filled with gel. We are bioelectrical beings with nervous systems and cells full of that structured water. The danger isn't that your ear gets hot. The danger is biological interference. The signal doesn't have to cook you to confuse your cells.
It's like noise. It's jamming the signal between cells.
Yeah, it's the argument. And they mention specific impacts on the brain, particularly in newborns, which is terrifying.
What are the claims?
The claim is that these pulsed frequencies can cause cell reduction in the hippocampus, which is the memory center of the brain, and can lead to severe psychiatric issues. It's interfering with the water and the crystals in the brain, creating that oscillatory disequilibrium we talked about.
There's one experiment they show that I just can't get out of my head. The car key experiment. I've actually seen people do this in real life, and I always thought it was just an urban myth.
It is a perfect and very simple demonstration of the body as antenna theory. You take your remote car key, you stand too far away from your car for it to unlock. You click it, nothing happens. The signal is too weak. Then you hold the key against your temple, you open your mouth slightly to change the resonance of your skull, you click it again, and the car unlocks.
It works. I know it works. But why? How?
Because it's not reflection, it's resonance. Your cranial cavity is filled with this electrolyte-rich, structured water. It acts as a dielectric lens. You are literally becoming part of the antenna array. Your brain amplifies the signal to extend its range.
That is simultaneously so cool and also completely terrifying.
Exactly. The host in the documentary asks the obvious, chilling question. If my brain can amplify a weak car key signal enough to unlock a door from 50 feet away, what is happening to my brain when it amplifies the billions of powerful 5G signals passing through it every single second of every day?
That is a very disturbing thought. It's like we're all walking amplifiers for noise that we didn't consent to.
And that noise might be doing more than just making us feel anxious or foggy. This leads into the specific mechanism of how these frequencies could affect our consciousness, and it focuses specifically on the pineal gland.
The third eye. Okay, this is where we get into some real Dan Brown territory.
It is. It's ancient symbolism meeting modern biology. The source goes deep into the imagery first. It points out that throughout history, cultures that had no contact with each other all revered the symbol of the pine cone.
Yeah, they show all these examples. The Babylonian god Tammuz holding a pine cone. The staff of the Egyptian god Osiris, it's topped with a pine cone.
And the Vatican, the court of the Piglia has the largest bronze statue in the entire Vatican, and it's a giant pine cone. The Pope's staff has a pine cone on it.
So the source argues this isn't just about a love for trees.
Not at all. It's about the pineal gland, which is literally shaped like a tiny pine cone and sits in the geometric center of the human brain.
So what is the function of this gland, according to the source? I know from biology that it produces melatonin to regulate sleep.
Physiologically, yes. But historically and spiritually, it's described as the seat of higher consciousness. It's the biological hardware that allows us to connect to the divine, to intuition, to realms beyond the purely material. They say it contains piezoelectric crystals, calcite microcrystals that can literally transmit and receive frequencies. It's a transceiver.
An organic radio in the middle of our head.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And the argument is that this gland is under systematic attack.
How so?
Through things like fluoride in the water supply, which is known to accumulate in the pineal gland and calcify it, basically turning it from a functioning crystal antenna into a useless stone.
And through these synthetic radio frequencies we were just talking about.
Yes. The theory is that if you can shut down the pineal gland, you disconnect the human being from their spiritual autonomy. You make them purely material, purely reactive, and much, much easier to control.
This connects directly to a term that I had never even heard before, radio wave sickness.
This is a fascinating bit of historical revisionism that's presented by the source. It's quite a claim. They say that back in the 1920s, during the Marconi era, when radio was first being rolled out globally, doctors started recognizing a new illness. They called it radio wave sickness.
And what were the symptoms?
The symptoms were things like memory loss, severe fatigue ringing in the ears, tinnitus dizziness, pressure in the chest, and this is the crucial part, loss of taste and smell.
Wait a minute. Loss of taste and smell. That sounds very, very familiar to anyone who lived through the year 2020.
Very familiar.
Yeah.
The source draws a direct, and I should say very controversial parallel here. They argue that this diagnosis, radio wave sickness, was deliberately scrubbed from Western medical books to protect the emerging and lucrative radio industry. You can't sell radios to every home if people think the waves are making them sick.
So they just rebranded it. They called it something else.
The claim is that it was rebranded as different strains of influenza or other viral outbreaks. And the source suggests there's a pattern. Every time there is a massive leap in electromagnetic technology, like the rollout of radar in World War II, or the launch of satellites in the 60s, or the recent jump to 5G, you see a spike in these viral symptoms.
So they're suggesting that what we think of as a virus might in some cases actually be the body trying to adapt and detox from a new harsh frequency environment, a kind of system shock.
That is the theory they put forward. They argue that the body is trying to detoxify from the radiation stress, and the symptoms are the result of that process. And from a control perspective, it makes sense. A sick population, one that is tired, foggy, low frequency, is a compliant population.
Whereas a healthy, high-vibration population that's fully connected to their intuition.
That population is very dangerous to a control system.
It's a lot to take in. It really shifts the blame from a bug you might catch to a signal you're constantly bathed in.
It does.
But the disconnection isn't just coming from the outside, is it? The documentary argues it's also coming from how we handle, or more accurately don't handle, our own internal stress. This brings us to the section on trauma.
This was, for me, one of the most compelling and practical parts of the documentary because it's so observable. You don't need a microscope or a frequency meter to see this in action. They interview a speaker who lived in war zones for years, Beirut, Sudan, and he observed something universal about the human reaction to immediate danger.
The fetal response.
Right. He describes being in Beirut, a missile flies overhead, and instantly, faster than thought, everyone around him curls forward. They protect their soft underbelly. It's a genetic encoding in the brainstem. It completely bypasses the logic center of the brain.
It's pure primal survival mode. But what happens after the danger passes is what really matters here.
That's the whole point. To understand this, we have to go with him to a bomb shelter in Sudan. He describes this moment of absolute terror. The air raid sirens are wailing, the bombs are falling, the ground is literally jumping beneath them. He's sitting there, and he has these two local children clinging to his lap.
A moment where pure survival instinct just completely takes over.
Exactly. And he notices something physical happening to these kids. They aren't just scared. They were visibly vibrating. It's a violent, high-frequency tremor that's just rippling through their arms, their legs, their torsos. It's completely involuntary.
Which, in our culture, we'd look at and say, oh, those poor kids are terrified out of their minds.
We interpret it as a symptom of fear, a sign of weakness. But then he looks around at the adults in the room, the men, the fathers, and they are stone still. They're rigid. Their muscles are locked, jaws clenched.
Because they're holding it together. They're trying to be strong, the whole don't let them see you shake mentality.
That is the cultural narrative. But biologically, the source argues the adults are the ones who are in real danger. The speaker asks one of the men, "Why aren't you shaking?" And the man replies, "We don't want the children to think that we're afraid."
But the kids are already shaking. They know there's fear in the room.
And here is the tragedy of it. The shaking, that tremor, is the body's organic, built-in mechanism to discharge the high-voltage energy of stress. Animals do it all the time. A gazelle gets chased by a lion, it escapes, and what does it do? It stands there and shakes violently for a few minutes. It's burning off the adrenaline and the cortisol. Then it gets up and goes back to grazing. It doesn't get PTSD.
Because it shook off the trauma, literally.
Literally. But humans,
Yeah.
we have an ego.
Yeah.
We have a prefrontal cortex that judges and says, shaking looks weak, shaking looks silly, shaking means I'm not in control. So we suppress the tremor. We lock it down with muscular tension.
I mean, where does all that energy go? It can't just disappear.
It stays trapped in the tissue. It becomes chronic tightness in your shoulders, chronic anxiety in your gut, chronic inflammation throughout your body. The source argues we are walking around as living pressure cookers of undischarged trauma because we're too cool or too strong to shake.
And then, because we feel that constant internal pressure, we try to relieve it artificially.
We drink a glass of wine to calm our nerves. We take a pill. We zone out on our phones. We do anything to numb the nervous system because we refuse to let it auto-regulate itself the way it was designed to.
The tremor is the calm down mechanism.
It is the calm down mechanism, and by stopping it, we ensure that we never actually calm down. We just marinate in the stress chemicals forever.
That is such a huge aha moment for me. We're actively fighting our own biology just to save face.
And this suppression of our natural primal instincts is part of a much larger theme in the documentary. They argue that we've been limited not just in our physical reactions, but in our very perception of reality itself. And this leads to the theory of the 12 senses.
This part just blew my mind. I learned in school that I have 5 senses. Sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. That's it. That's the box we live in.
That's the Aristotelian model. And the source brings in a researcher named David Martin, who argues that this was a deliberate limitation enforced by the power structures of the time, specifically the Vatican.
He mentions a specific decree in France, right? This wasn't just like a philosophical suggestion. It was the law.
It was the law. In 1624, he claims that at the urging of the Vatican, the French Parliament passed a decree that banned any criticism of Aristotle's theories under penalty of death.
Penalty of death for saying, hey, maybe we have a 6th sense. That seems a bit extreme.
It does. But the argument is that by limiting humans to only the 5 material senses, you effectively trap them in the material world. If you can only believe what you can see, hear, and touch, you are disconnected from intuition, from frequency sensing, from that pineal connection we talked about earlier. You become easy to manage.
So what are the other senses? I mean, I know we technically have a sense of balance, the vestibular sense.
Right, and we have thermoception, the sense of temperature. Nociception, the sense of pain. Proprioception, knowing where your body is in space. But the documentary implies even deeper ones, a sense of life, which is perceiving the vitality or lack thereof in another being, a sense of thought, which is basically telepathy or strong intuition, a sense of ego, perceiving the intent or will of another person.
The idea being that we are designed to perceive a much richer, more vibrant reality, but we've had blinders put on us.
Exactly, and David Martin takes this concept even further. He connects this historical suppression of our senses to our modern behavior. He calls it the epigenetics of cowardice.
That is a phrase that feels like a punch in the gut. We need to unpack that. I know what genetics are, my blue eyes, my height, but epigenetics.
Think of your DNA as a grand piano. The keys themselves are the genes. They're fixed. You can't change the keys you were born with. But epigenetics is the sheet music. It's the set of instructions that tells the body which keys to play, how loud to play them, and for how long. It's the software that runs on the genetic hardware.
So the hardware's the same, but the software can be rewritten based on experience.
Exactly. And David Martin's provocative argument is that trauma, specifically the historical trauma of persecution, rewrites that sheet music. The wild types, the humans who stood up, who questioned authority, who used all their senses, they were burned as heretics. They were executed. They were systematically removed from the gene pool.
So we are the descendants of the ones who stayed quiet to survive.
We are the survivors of cowards. He argues that we carry an epigenetic encoding to comply, to fear authority, to not stick our necks out. If your great-great-grandfather learned that speaking up got him beaten, his body places a chemical marker on his DNA that essentially says, danger, keep your head down. That marker can be passed to you. You aren't born just with his eye color. You might be born with his learned fear.
Wow. That explains a lot about human behavior, honestly.
Yeah.
It explains why it's so hard for people to go against the grain, even when they know something is deeply wrong.
It's programmed into us. And it sets up the perfect trap of modern society. If we are programmed to comply, and we are limited in our senses, we fall for what he calls the illusion of choice.
This is the menu analogy. I love this. It's so simple, but so damning.
It's a brilliant way to explain it. Martin argues that we think we are free because we have options. You can choose brand A or brand B. You can vote for the party on the left or the party on the right. But he says that is not choice. That is selection from curated options.
It's choosing from a menu someone else wrote.
Exactly. True choice is infinite. True choice includes the option none of the above. True choice includes creating a path that isn't on the menu at all. But because our perception is limited, we don't even realize we can leave the restaurant. We just sit there and argue over the side dishes.
He makes the point that you cannot have true informed consent if you don't have all your senses active.
You can't. How can you truly agree to something if you can't perceive the full reality of it? If your intuition is blocked, if your frequency sensor is jammed by 5G, and if you're epigenetically terrified of saying no, is your yes really valid? Or is it just compliance disguised as consent?
That is the ultimate question of this entire deep dive, isn't it? So how do we break out? It feels like the deck is completely stacked against us, geologically, biologically, historically, but the source doesn't just leave us in the doom and gloom. It pivots to a solution. And it centers on identity, the concept of I am.
It starts with stripping away all the labels we attach to ourselves. There's this beautiful analogy in the documentary about a green object. The speaker holds up something green and asks, "What color is this?" And the host says it's green. And the speaker replies, "No, it is reflecting green. It has absorbed every other color in the spectrum. The only thing it isn't is green."
Whoa, okay, that breaks your brain a little bit.
It does.
So by that logic, if I call myself a podcaster or a father or a skeptic,
Those are just reflections. They are labels for the outside world to perceive you by. They aren't the core reality of what you are. The source argues that we have to strip all of that away to get down to the fundamental I am, the naked inner light. Remember that flash of light at conception?
we're circling right back to the beginning.
That's the core. That's the energy. That's the frequency. And the way to reclaim it, according to the documentary, is surprisingly simple. It's the power of refusal.
Suppose they gave a war and nobody came.
Precisely. The entire system of control, whether it's artificial frequencies or curated choices or manufactured fear, it all relies on our participation. It relies on us picking up the menu and ordering from it. If people simply stop playing the game dissolves.
They talk about a great reset, but not the one we hear about in the news. A different kind.
A personal reset. Returning to nature. There's a mention of using things like copper pyramids in your garden to enhance the soil frequency, getting back to that structured life force. But mostly it's about learning to trust your gut, that tremor, that intuition over the so-called intelligence of the system.
It's about becoming a wild type again.
It is. It's about reactivating the antenna, cleaning the water in your cells, shaking off the trauma, and realizing that the menu they handed you is a complete fiction.
This has been a massive journey. From the magma at the center of the earth to the pine cone in the center of the brain, it really changes the way you walk through the world.
It really highlights that being well-informed isn't just about reading the news or gathering data. It's about understanding the vessel you are processing that data with. You have to tune the instrument before you can even begin to play the music.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we really want to leave you with that final thought from David Martin. It's a challenge, really, a piece of homework.
Look at a major decision in your life right now. It could be a career move, a medical choice, a relationship, anything. And ask yourself this one honest question. Did I actually make a choice? Or did I just select from a menu that someone else wrote for me?
And if the answer is the latter, maybe it's time to put down the menu, walk into the kitchen, and cook something for yourself.
Or at the very least, allow yourself to shake a little bit.
Exactly. Shake it off. Thanks for diving deep with us.
We'll see you on the next one.